It is Wednesday, August 4th here in Draft Sharks Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to night 2 of the Draft Sharks Invitational. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. Back with me tonight are Jared Smola and Adam Krautwurst, and we are kicking off we're in the midst of the second ever Draft Sharks Invitational now, as I mentioned. We had Draft 1 last night. Some interesting things. A team that didn't take a quarterback for basically the entire time that we were streaming. We're going to wait and see what's going on tonight because we've got another group of experienced drafters, some familiar analysts. Adam, what surprised you most from night 1?
Yeah, probably Team 11, Anthony Crescenzo, not taking a quarterback till round 13 and then only taking 2 of them. I think we have a rule that we didn't talk about last night is we can't leave the stream until everyone has a quarterback. So hopefully we don't get any more 12 or 13th round QB1 picks. But, that was probably the most surprising one to me that stood out. Everything else was just looked like different people playing out their different strategies.
Yeah, that was definitely the single most surprising thing. Jared, what stood out to you about night 1 beyond that?
Yeah, sorry, I was tuning Adam out there, making sure this draft got off time and everything. I'm not sure what Adam said, but my biggest surprise was just how late some of those quarterbacks went, as we talked about. Again, I think the Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson. I thought those guys went half a round or so later than they should in this super flex format.
Yeah, we'll get into where quarterbacks went, what might be different tonight from how it went down last night, exactly where all the positions sorted out, and some of the other surprises. Of course, we are in year 2. Last year it was 5 leagues. This year it's 6 of them, so we're up from 60 to 72 teams in this tournament. It is a 25-round draft. It is best ball scoring. It is tight end premium. That means 1.5 points per reception for that position. Straight PPR scoring for everybody else. You start 2 running backs, you start 3 wideouts, you start 1 tight end, but there are 2 flex spots. It is a super flex league, so one of those flex players can be a quarterback any week. So we're basically all looking for 2 good quarterbacks, probably 3+ quarterbacks on our roster overall. So we'll see exactly where this goes tonight. And if the quarterbacks go any earlier tonight than they did last night, unlike most expert draft setups, as we mentioned before, not just bragging rights on the line here. We've got money on the line. The winner of every one of those 6 leagues gets $250. $2,000 goes to the top prize. It was Peter Overzet last year. This year, we've got a larger field vying for that money, and we'll go ahead and meet some of the drafters tonight as things get underway. So the draft order for League 2, number 1, Jason Moore. He's one of the 3 personalities that make up the Fantasy Footballers, the industry's top-rated podcast. He finished top 10 in the Fantasy Pros Accuracy Contest 2017, 18, and 19. Jason is at JasonFFL on Twitter. Number 2 in the draft order is Billy Muzio. He is a co-host of the Fantasy Football Fanalists podcast driven by fantasy data. You can find his stuff there as well. He's also an experienced high-volume player at FFPC. Billy finished top 20 overall in last year's FFPC Playoff Challenge. He sports multiple league titles in the FFPC Main Event and Football Guys Championship. I know he's been drafting a lot with friend of the show and friend of Draft Sharks, Todd Burrows, in best ball drafts this year. So we'll see how Billy drafts tonight. We'll see how Todd drafts in a later one. I believe he's in my league that's drafting next week. Third on tonight's draft board is Graham Barfield. He is a co-owner and content producer at Fantasy Points. He's a former contributor at NFL.com, among other places. Probably best known is Graham for developing his own yards created stat for analyzing running backs. He finished number 4 overall in last year's DS Invitational, 1 spot ahead of me in the overall standings, so I'll be gunning for Graham this year. He is at Graham Barfield on Twitter, just to make sure nobody's confused. Number 4, Mike Pareca. He won the 2019 FFPC Main Event, as if you needed to do any more than that to make your name known in this industry. He also finished 3rd overall in the 2018 Football Guys Players Championship. So safe to say that Mike knows how to draft in a tournament format. Mike is at MikePOR21 on Twitter. Adam, I know you're familiar with Mike Pareca.
Yeah, Mike's one of those high stakes guys. Certainly respect his game. I think he's Team Vader in the draft room, unless he's changed that. He can maybe tell me if he has, but yeah, Mike's a problem to draft against for sure. Same with Billy. Billy's another high stakes guy. I know he's an industry guy as well, but I see him grinding in those high stakes streets.
seem to be more and more people crossing those lines either way, and it can be tough to tell who's a pro and who's a Joe at this point. So maybe it's a good thing that it's blurring. And of course, this is the tournament that's trying to blur that line and see who's just good at fantasy football. Number 5 in our draft tonight is our own Kevin English. In addition to the content and the personalized answers you've gotten used to from him over the years, Kevin's a pretty serious player in fantasy as well. He took second in the Millie Maker on DraftKings a couple years ago. He sits number 1 all-time in Fantasy Pros daily fantasy accuracy cup standings, including multiple top 5 single-season finishes in that competition. Kevin also ranked number 1 out of 139 competitors in the Betting Pros Weekly Picks competition in 2018. So not just fantasy for him. As soon as New York State allows us to actually do it on a regular basis, I'm connecting my sportsbook apps directly to Kevin's brain and going to let him make me some money over the next couple of years. Dan Williamson is drafting right behind Kevin in this draft, or ahead of him on around the turn. Dan is a co-host of the GOAT District Pod, which I have been told is also streaming tonight's draft, though they're normally focused on farming tips, I'm guessing. Dan plays high stakes in all areas: redraft, dynasty, best ball. He's on Twitter at Overhyped Sleeper. That's no E at the end, SLEEPR. He's got A.J. Brown as his avatar, so we'll see if Dan Williamson comes away with A.J. Brown in this draft, or if that's just a misdirection. Number 7 is Anthony Amico. He produces dynasty content for Establish the Run. He's a staff writer for Football Guys. He is also a teacher and a football coach when not generating content. You can find Anthony on Twitter at Amicsta, AMICSTA. Number 8 is Rich Rebar, who was a guest of ours on the Draft Sharks podcast around NFL draft time. Of course, people I'm sure are familiar with him. His Twitter bio really already describes what he does much better than I could. Connoisseur of context, fake football meteorologist at Sharp Football, the Swami of Konami. So, yes, it was Rich who coined that term, Konami Code QB, for anybody who didn't already know that. Rich is at Lord Reeves on Twitter, and good luck saying that out loud without the bad British accent. Number 9 in our draft order, Jerry Hooton, is a first-time competitor in the DS Invitational. Certainly not new to tournament format. He won the 2020 FFPC main event, so that makes the past 2 FFPC main event winners in this draft tonight. So we'll have to watch and see what they do in this particular draft. He talked to Adam and Mike Shope on the Deep End podcast back in April about that win. So you can check that out on draftsharks.com, any of our various podcast channels. Number 10, Theo Greminger is another experienced high-stakes player. He finished second in the NFFC's Silver Bullet contest in 2019. He ranked number 1 that season in the NFFC's combined standings. Theo is part of the GOAT District podcast as well, contributes to playerprofiler.com. He is at the OG Fantasy on Twitter. Number 11, Scott Fish, runs a little tournament you might have heard about called the Scott Fish Bowl. He was a content creator before that, a pioneer of the Devi format. Scott runs the Safe Leads platform with Ryan McDowell, co-hosts the Commission Impossible podcast with him as well. Scott is at ScottFish24 on Twitter. And then finally, at number 12, John Paulson, the director of forecasting at 4for4 Football. He won the Fantasy Pros Accuracy Contest twice, has ranked top 6 for 9 of the past 11 seasons. You can also hear John Paulson on the Most Accurate podcast, 4for4. He is at 4for4_John on Twitter. Jared, what do you think of the field tonight?
Strong field, like they all are. I want to get into this draft though, because this is why I think we've created like the best fantasy format out there now. Because just look how different this first round even was compared to what we saw last night. I know Adam has last night's board pulled up, and we had a bunch more running backs go in the first round last night. Just 3 running backs in the first tier, 6 quarterbacks in the first round, which again I think is closer to what it should be. You have the 2 tight ends going with Kelsey and Waller, and to me, the most surprising start would be Paulson opening with Rodgers and Herbert, and not necessarily the fact that he went quarterback, but the fact that he took both of those guys ahead of Russell Wilson, who is still on the board as of right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm so fired up over what I'm seeing right now. I mean, in what fantasy league in the world are you going to see 3 running backs and 1 receiver taken in the first round of a draft? It's like, it's awesome. This is what I expected last night. Is more quarterbacks, you know what I mean? More, I think last night we had 2 tight ends as well. Yeah, so the same 2 tight ends, but this is fun. It's going to be interesting to see where guys kind of let these running back values fall. It's going to be cool. Yeah, I mean, John Paulson goes quarterback from the 12 spot. Last night, Geller Gills from the 12 spot went receiver. So it's going to be really cool to see how guys build. And, yeah, to have it be Rodgers Herbert there, is pretty interesting. But neither of them were going to fall back to him. So
we do have the draft board running live here on the stream. You can also find it in the Draft Sharks Discord. So head into there, head into the DS Invitational thread. We're not going to be on here for the entire draft. We're going to stream probably about half of it, depending on how long it takes for the last team to draft a quarterback, maybe the last team to draft a running back. I know last year, one of the leagues we were waiting for Mike Beers to finally take his first running back. So, we'll see exactly how tonight's draft goes, but you can find the entire thing in the Draft Sharks Discord and follow along even after we're done. We'll also post the results after this draft completes. Let's talk about some of the rest of the picks. Christian McCaffrey went first overall for the second straight night. It was Dalvin Cook second off the board tonight. Patrick Mahomes third to Graham Barfield. Then Devontae Adams to Mike Parecka. Kevin took Josh Allen at number 5, so a little bit earlier, but still Josh Allen as the second quarterback off the board. Then Dan Williamson took Travis Kelce. Lamar Jackson is the third quarterback to Anthony Amico. Kyler Murray to Rich Rebar at number 8 in the first round. Dak Prescott right after that to Jerry Hooten's team. So Jerry clearly not that worried about Dak's shoulder strain to this point. Theo took Darren Waller at number 10, and then Scott Fish took Alvin Kamara, and then the two quarterbacks that you guys mentioned to John Paulson. So, Jared, do you think that Russell Wilson would have, I don't know if easily is the word, but you definitely would have gone Russell Wilson over one of those two guys at the turn?
I would have, and they're close. I think Wilson, Rodgers, Herbert are all in a tier together behind those top 5. So it's close. But I mean, again, the fact that Mike got Wilson, in the late second round, I think, that's the single best quarterback value we've seen come off the board so far.
It's interesting that not only did we see 6 go in the first round tonight as opposed to 3 last night, but that didn't appear to give any urgency to the 3 drafters that picked in between that turn and Mike Parecka's pick at the 9th spot in round 2, because there are 3 drafters in between there that passed on Russell Wilson and took a different position instead and don't have a quarterback to this point. So people not, chasing a run or feeling the urgency to get those quarterbacks, we'll see how early those guys decide to address that position. After the Justin Herbert pick, following Aaron Rodgers to John's team, we had Derrick Henry go to Scott Fish, then Tyreek Hill to Theo Greminger. So neither of those guys has taken a quarterback yet through 2 picks. Scott Fish started with 2 running backs. Theo took a tight end and then a wideout. Adam, what do you think about starting with those 2? What do you expect to come back to them?
Yeah, I think that they're going to are we talking about Jason Moore here?
No, talking about Scott Fish and Theo.
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting. I was just thinking Scott Fish probably has the most experience with stuff like this because the Scott Fish Bowl has a unique kind of, I don't want to say similar because they have a lot of different scoring settings, but they're tight end premium, they're super flex. This is best ball, but yeah, I think Scott will probably just wait it out, and he probably has tiers of quarterbacks that he's going to try to get different pockets of. And to answer Joe there in the comments, yes, this is super flex. So that's why you're seeing 6 quarterbacks go in the first round. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Scott went running back. I mean, if who knows, he might have Kamara and Henry as his number 3 and number 4 running backs, and to get him there at basically the turn is pretty sweet for him. But we'll see. Maybe he's going to be like the Team 11 last night that's going to wait 12 rounds to get his QB.
Yeah, always a good question to ask. It is super flex. Thank you, Joe, for not being the person who says, why are there all those quarterbacks going? You guys are idiots. You don't know how to draft this. It's definitely a better way to approach it. So we mentioned the 3 quarterbacks going in round 1 last night. 4 of them went in round 2. Tonight we had 6 in round 1. We had 3 more in round 2. So that's 9 off the board in the first 2 rounds versus 7 last night. Another 4 went in round 3 last night. So we'll see how round 3 plays out as we move further through it. We had 8 running backs in the first 2 rounds last night. We had Aaron Jones go as the 4th running back off the board right in the middle of that round. Tonight it was Derrick Henry as the 4th running back, but around that 1-2 turn with those quarterbacks pushing him out. So moving beyond the picks by Scott and Theo that I mentioned, Jerry Hooten took Stephon Diggs to follow Dak Prescott. Then it was Zeke Elliott to Rich Rebar's team. He's got Kyler Murray and Zeke to start things off. Calvin Ridley to Anthony Amico, who started with Lamar Jackson. We got Antonio Gibson to Dan Williamson's team with Travis Kelce already on it. Austin Eckler went to Kevin English with Josh Allen. I'm sure he's happy to get Austin Eckler as the 7th running back, just past the middle of round 2. Russell Wilson, as you mentioned earlier, Jared, went to Mike at pick 9 of round 2. He's the 8th quarterback off the board at that spot. Then it's Aaron Jones as running back 8, DeAndre Hopkins as wide receiver 5, and back at the 2-3 turn to Jason Moore's team, he took Tom Brady as the 9th quarterback, his first quarterback. Jared, what do you think about Russell Wilson, Tom Brady lasting, and any other picks in that mix?
Again, Wilson stands out as a big value to me. Like, I think he should be going clearly ahead of guys like Brady, and then we had Tannehill go at 3-2. So, the fact that he got Wilson there, I think that's a win for Mike. The other thing that sticks out for me through these first 2 rounds is these drafters are sort of reacting to the starting lineups here, where you have to start 2 running backs, but you must start 3 wide receivers every week. So I think we see it a bit more wide receiver heavy early on. Like, we had here wide receiver 5 go ahead of running back 9, where in a league that, starts the same number of running backs and wideouts, I think you'd see it be a bit more running back heavy early on. So, again, drafters definitely playing to the format here, I think.
Overall, the numbers match, though. We had 8 running backs in the first 2 rounds last night and 5 wideouts in that range as well. So, yeah, it would be curious to see how this continues. For me, Russell Wilson is pretty easily ahead of Justin Herbert, and it's not that I wouldn't be shocked if Justin Herbert outscores Russell Wilson this year by any means. Justin Herbert had a fantastic debut season, but maybe I'm listening too much to the hype of the faster-paced offense that's going to let the Seattle players actually, run more plays, score more points, do some of the things that they do well. But it's more so a bet on Russell Wilson because beyond the second half of last season, he's just been very good for almost all of his career.
Yeah, no, I think that's good value on Russell Wilson. Another big value, too, from yesterday to today was Kittle. Kittle, to get him at the 3-1, you know what I mean, of a tight end premium, that's pretty sick to have the possibly the number 1 running back. And I don't think Kittle's going to finish as the tight end 1, but he could, to have both of those guys locked in. Kittle went, where did he go? Yeah, Kittle went the 4th pick of the 2nd round last night. So that's a huge kind of difference there, and you can tell it's probably just a difference in team build really between all these guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wide variation in the way people feel about George Kittle right now either. I don't think he's as safe a bet for targets as either Darren Waller or Travis Kelce, but the upside for him certainly is close to those 2 guys.
Sure.
Yeah, we should mention, too, before we get on to round 3 here, Dan Williamson making Antonio Gibson the 6th running back off the board. Definitely planting his flag there on a guy who, tends to go 4, 5, 6 spots later among running backs. But, decent chance he wasn't going to get back to him in round 3. So if you like him, no issue, just grabbing your guy there.
It's always too bad that we can't play those things out and see if he would have made it back to him, because he took another running back in the next round. It was the 11th running back off the board. It's certainly possible that Antonio Gibson makes it to that 11th running back spot, although it's tough to bet on right now. So, yeah, definitely a flag planting move by Dan Williamson on that pick of Antonio Gibson there. Mentioned George Kittle starting off round 3 to Jason Moore's team. So he's got Christian McCaffrey, Tom Brady, George Kittle. Billy Muzio's got Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Hopkins, and now Ryan Tannehill, 10th quarterback off the board as his first QB. Graham Barfield followed Patrick Mahomes with Aaron Jones and Saquon Barkley. Barkley's the 9th RB off the board right here. I think that's a fair price for him. Round 3 seems crazy, but it's super flex, so you have to factor that in. Adam, are you willing to take Saquon Barkley among the top 10 running backs? It's a little bit tougher to frame it when you're not looking at a standard draft and you're looking at whether he's in round 1 or round 2, but do you like him less than any of the running backs that have since gone in this one?
Do I like him less? I like him the same. It's just
that's like a parent who, when you ask them who their favorite kid is.
That's right. Before you even asked me about Barkley, I was looking at Graham's team like, man, I get Mahomes and Barkley with a little Aaron Jones sprinkled in the middle there. That could be a smash team too. A team that could just go 6 straight receivers here. And if Barkley stays healthy or gets healthy, I'm torn on Barkley. I feel like I'm a high volume drafter, right? So I want to get him in spots where he's like big value. Like I feel like the time to get Barkley is now. Get him in the mid-second if you can of a normal, a non-superflex draft. Get him at the best value that you can, knowing that as soon as a report comes out of camp that he looks good or the coaches like what they see or whatever, he's going to skyrocket back up ahead half a round. So if you think Barkley's going to get there, then now's the time to jump on him, because even by the end of the draft starts Invitational, that's a week away. There could be camp reports that say he looks great. He could skyrocket in just this tournament. So I think being able to get him in the mid-third to go along with the QB1 is a pretty sweet deal.
Or Barkley could not finish his broccoli at lunch at training camp, and then Joe Judge might make him run sprints, and he can tear his other ACL, and then the whole thing will be lost.
Absolutely.
What a goofball camp that is right now. Every single report just makes me chuckle, since I don't like the Giants anyway.
It's a mess.
Beyond Saquon Barkley, we had DK Metcalf. So Mike Pareca has started Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf. He got the Seahawks stack there. We'll see if he makes Jared happy by adding Tyler Lockett to it beyond this one. But, Jared, I know you like the Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf stack.
Yep, and we saw that last night from Jack Miller, I believe it was, who took Wilson in the second and DK Metcalf in the third after taking Aaron Jones in the first. So a couple Packers in the first round, then the Seahawks stack. We'll see if Mike doubles that up with Lockett.
So, again, maybe you're going to have to differentiate, because apparently everybody's going to get the Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf stack this year. So you got to go either Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett, or all of them, or make sure you get that Dwayne Eskridge late in the draft when we've long since stopped streaming. Kevin took another running back, took Joe Mixon, who I think he has in 98.3% of his drafts so far this offseason. Josh Allen, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon for Kevin's team so far. Running back 10 off the board, certainly a fair price. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the next one off the board, with Antonio Gibson and Travis Kelce on Dan Williamson's team, so no quarterbacks for him through 3 rounds. Anthony Amico took Jonathan Taylor after that at running back 12. We talked about Saquon Barkley slipping a little bit. Jared, do you think that this is the spot where Jonathan Taylor belongs?
Yeah, I think it's about right. I think where Saquon went was about right at this point. The tide even seems to be starting to turn on Saquon. Even there's been some positive reports over the past couple of days, so I wouldn't be surprised if we already saw his ADP floor. And then Taylor, he went RB13 last night and he goes RB12 here, so that seems to be where he's settling. And that's another guy whose price is going to change as we get closer to week 1, as we learn whether the Colts are going to have Carson Wentz and or Quentin Nelson.
I think anywhere in that range is fair for Taylor. I would take Najee Harris over him, but if you say prefer Taylor, I think he is a better player, so I can certainly understand leaning in that direction. I saw from James Brimacombe on Twitter today, who does a lot of the best ball drafting, he shared the beginning of a puppy draft where he took Christian McCaffrey 1 and then got Jonathan Taylor and CEH at the 2-3 turn. So that's how far Taylor is capable of sliding, especially in that format where people have been letting those round 2 and 3 running backs slide down the board. It looks like a buy opportunity in general on an underdog, whether Jonathan Taylor's your guy or not. I had a draft where I started McCaffrey and then got Joe Mixon, and now I'm drawing a blank on who the third one was, but somebody, Najee Harris at the 2-3 turn. So a buying opportunity on early running backs there. Justin Jefferson followed Jonathan Taylor off the board in this one. Nick Chubb went RB13 next. Then Najee Harris is RB14. So we had Rich Rebar start with Kyler Murray, Zeke Elliott, Justin Jefferson. Then he added another wide receiver after that. We'll get back to that one. Jerry Hooton took Nick Chubb as his first running back in round 3. Dak, then Stephon Diggs, then Nick Chubb. Theo Greminger followed Darren Waller with Tyreek Hill, then Najee Harris, Scott Fish, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Kyle Pitts. So Kyle Pitts, where did he go last? So he went at 35 tonight. He went at 41 last night. So close to where he went in the night 1 draft, but less separation between him and Kittle, Adam, as you kind of mentioned earlier.
Yeah, last night him and Kittle went side by side, tight end 4 and tight end 5. And tonight there's a little bit of a gap, but it went to the same team. So again, I'm a Hawkinson guy. I mean, Pitts to me, Pitts has that touchdown upside. I mean, if they're going to line him out wide, especially inside the red zone, he's certainly a monster target there. But Hawkinson has that target upside as being the number 1 pass catcher on that team for a team that's going to be losing most of the year, every game. So I like that start. That's a neat little two stud running backs, 2 stud tight ends start, and there's actually been 2 quarterbacks. So last night at this point there were 14 QBs taken. Now there's only 12. So maybe Scott Fish gets lucky and gets a quarterback or two to fall to him that weren't there at that point last night.
Yeah, you mentioned Scott's 4-player start. We've got Alvin Kamara, we've got Derrick Henry, we've got Kyle Pitts, we've got TJ Hawkinson. So he doubled up on tight ends. He is the only team that doesn't have a quarterback to this point. And it was that 11 slot last night that kept us waiting rounds and rounds and rounds for first quarterback. So we might have to watch out. There might be just some kind of hex on that number 11 spot in these drafts. So you're right, though, in that quarterbacks are sliding a little bit, and Scott might get a little lucky with what gets back to him. But, Jared, it's going to be interesting to see where he does take the leap at that position.
And, again, I think there's plenty of options still out there. You kind of see this, those top 7-8 guys kind of fly off the board. Then the quarterbacks do start to slow down a bit. So Scott won't have any problem locking up 2 starters. We'll see how early he wants to go on them, and then how early he wants to grab the third.
Adam, how surprised are you at the gap between Tom Brady and Ryan Tannehill, who went fairly close together, and then Matthew Stafford at QB 11? There is a pretty big range of no quarterbacks in between those. You think Matthew Stafford would normally be closer to those guys? You think maybe it's the thumb that's pushing him down a little bit?
I think maybe, and this probably applies to every draft, but all those teams had a quarterback except for Dan Williamson. So maybe those teams didn't want to double up so early at QB, which I totally get. But I think at QB 11, the quarterback 11, I think that's fair. That's where he normally goes. I would take him over Tannehill, but that's just me. But no, I think the spot at quarterback that he might is fine. But I think those teams all had quarterbacks there, and that's probably why they passed on him.
I think if I were choosing between Tannehill and Stafford 10 times, I would probably take 5 of each of those guys because they both have very good receivers. They both seem set up overall. Tannehill, Tannehill's probably not quite the passer Matthew Stafford is, but I also wonder if Matthew Stafford's a little bit overrated on that front, and clearly Tannehill has the rushing upside. So, Jared, where would you – 10 picks, it has to be either Stafford or Tannehill. What do you think the split is between those?
7 Matt Staffords, 3 Tannehills for me.
Yeah.
I just trust that Rams offense more than I do Tennessee's offense. I mean, we've talked about in the podcast about the coordinator change in Tennessee. I'm a bit worried about that. Tennessee's just so thin too. And Julio Jones is already missing practice now. If he misses time this season, then you're kind of back to obviously where we were pre-Julio trade, where it's kind of AJ Brown and not much else. So I just think Tannehill has a bit more downside than Matt Stafford does. I really struggled to see Stafford disappointing this season with those wide receivers and with Sean McVay running that offense.
Jared, I think you're forgetting that Julio Jones has not practiced since 2012. It's just not something he does anymore. They put him in his hyperbaric chamber. They unlock it on Sunday, and he comes out and he steals cornerback souls.
He also hasn't stayed healthy for an entire season since 2012. So
there you go.
I don't know. I think that might be going a little far, but yeah, we'll see where it goes. Obviously, there is a little bit of fragility there in Tennessee if Julio Jones goes down. But then if Julio Jones goes down, maybe we finally get the A.J. Brown season that we were hoping he was going to have before Julio Jones arrived. So we'll be watching that. I'm also wondering about the Rams offense. It's going to be a big year for them because they really fell off in production last year, and especially if you look at scoring versus yardage, it's easy to say it's because of Jared Goff, but this year will show us whether it was just Jared Goff, whether it's the league getting used to Sean McVay's offense and learning how to defend against it. I'm curious to see how it plays out. I'm buying into the Rams offense this year, but I'm going to be watching to see if we learn a little bit something that we thought was Jared Goff's fault last year.
Yeah, I think we're overestimating Jared Goff. I think he's really bad. And I think that, Sean McVay had to tell the guy what to do up until the microphone went out in his headset, the entire time. I think Stafford I think was overrated early on in his career. He had Calvin Johnson that he would just chuck it up to, but I think Stafford is so much better than Goff, and he's a slinger. He's a gunslinger too. So I think for fantasy purposes, he's going to be, just so much better. And there's, it's hard to put in projections too, guys playing with a chip on their shoulder or guys having a rejuvenation in their career, moving from Detroit to Los Angeles, moving to Hollywood. I just feel like you can't put that in projections, you can't put that in profiles, but there's something to be said for that. And I just think that the sky's the limit with this Rams offense. I think it's going to be like 2018 when they had that explosion, like you said, Matt. Maybe the league caught on to McVay. I think McVay's young enough and smart enough to be able to transition enough to make it back to where it was in 2018.
I don't know. You also think that you're indestructible when you're young. Maybe he's too young. Maybe he needs to get a little older and start calling people young bucks like Jared did last night.
Adam, tell me how much having a chip on your shoulder increases a touchdown rate, and I'll bake that into Matt Stafford's projections this season.
I think that's in PFF somewhere. I'm sure they have that chip on their shoulder. But that's what I'm saying. You can't factor that in. Like, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know all that type of stuff. I'm just buying into. Stafford got traded for Jared Goff. I mean, how does that not like make you? I mean, granted, there was picks involved, but goodness.
No, I mean, there's no chip involved there. That's exactly what he wanted them to do. He was like, guys, please, I don't have that much left in my career. I would really like to play in a good place. I know that my house looks like a museum, but I want to move to for real California instead of just living in California, Detroit. So. Right. We'll go back to the picks here. DeAndre Swift, by the way, was 15th running back off the board to John Paulson's team. Obviously, John likes him. I can't say that I can get behind DeAndre Swift as a 15th running back, but I know that Jared likes him better than I do. So, Jared, what do you think about DeAndre Swift versus the few running backs that have followed him off the board?
I think that's right where Swift should go. I do think he's sort of the start of a tier behind, your Najee Harris's, your Nick Chubb's, your Clyde Edwards-Helaire's, but I do in full PPR. I prefer Swift over, J.K. Dobbins, Chris Carson, Miles Sanders, Montgomery, those types. Again, because of that pass catching, I think he is a good bet for 50 plus catches this season and could get up to like 60 plus.
I think I like Carson a lot better than Swift, but I do think
we know.
I think Swift is going to start a lot of tiers this year. It's just a matter of whether it's the people who own him or the people who passed on him. We did finally have a quarterback go to Scott Fish's team, so nothing dramatic like last night. And then he took a second one right after that. So before we get to other picks, let's look at what Scott did. I think that he's probably going with a color-coded chart, so everybody who's drafting with him now should expect 2 green picks next to start at receiver. He went with Kamara and Derrick Henry to start, Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson after that, then Kirk Cousins late in round 5, Matt Ryan early in round 6. Those are the 16th and 17th quarterbacks off the board. I would imagine that especially since he already drafted Kyle Pitts, Scott Fish is happy to get those as his first 2 quarterbacks in rounds 5 and 6.
Yeah, I'm sure he's obviously happy about getting those 2 guys. I'm just surprised he didn't take maybe one with a little bit more upside, like Justin Fields right there that went to Theo. I would have taken, Cousins or Ryan and then Fields. I just feel like you got to have a guy with kind of monster upside, and Ryan and Cousins do not have that. So I think those were kind of floor picks there. But I love the strategy of how he's doing it. Running backs, 2 elite running backs, 2 elite tight ends, and then two quarterbacks here, and then maybe, like I said, maybe he'll pound receiver for the next 7 or 8 rounds. But this draft is certainly behind in quarterback compared to last night. So he was able to get a little bit better value on the quarterbacks he was looking for.
I think the question between Matt. Go ahead, Jared.
I would guess Scott was just trying to block up 2 guys who are going to start all 17 games barring injury, versus Justin Fields, who I know Matt doesn't want to hear, but there's a chance he doesn't start the majority of the season.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was about to say. I think the question at quarterback there is whether you take the guy that is going to start or whether you take the guy that if he starts, he could be terrific in fantasy, but he also might not start for a long time, depending on how Andy Dalton plays in the regular season. So, that's a question none of us will be able to answer until we're in the midst of the season. I think if you do wait a little bit, it makes sense. Well, I was about to say it makes sense to get guys that are going to start, but it also then makes sense to shoot for ceiling. So, I mean, you could go either way. I don't think there's a right or wrong. We'll see how it goes. I would imagine that even if it was close, already having Kyle Pitts on the roster pushes him toward Matt Ryan. It probably would me too. I mean, I don't like Kyle Pitts or Matt Ryan for fantasy this year. At what you have to pay for them, price is more of an issue for Pitts than it is for Ryan. But I don't like the upside on either of them. But if they're going to help you win a league or an overall championship, like in this particular format, you're going to need the quarterback to at least be pretty good to get Kyle Pitts to that ceiling that'll make him worth that tight end 4 pick for you.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of why stacking makes sense in all leagues, really, in best ball especially. Like if Kyle Pitts has a big season, Matt Ryan is going to at least pay off quarterback 17 price tag, and then vice versa. If Matt Ryan has a big season, it's going to be because Kyle Pitts had a nice year.
Yeah, and there you go, Mac. Scott just confirmed that's exactly what you were saying. He wanted a guy that was locked into a second starter, which is fine. That's fine.
Yeah, and I would say that maybe if you didn't have Kyle Pitts already, then maybe you lean toward the ceiling guy. But yeah, it certainly makes sense to take somebody that is going to be starting for the team. So let's go back to recapping some of the picks. Beyond Matthew Stafford, we did have J.K. Dobbins go at running back 16, so a few spots after DeAndre Swift, but the next running back off the board. Then it was A.J. Brown. Mark Andrews is the 6th tight end off the board toward the middle of round 4. Jalen Hurts is the 12th quarterback to Dan Williamson's team. That was his first quarterback. CeeDee Lamb after that, wide receiver 10 in this one. He was wide receiver 11 last night, I believe. So a slight climb for CeeDee Lamb here, and they haven't even started Hard Knocks yet. I mean, what is the ceiling for where CeeDee Lamb's going to go in drafts, you think, Jared?
I guess he could get up to, the Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, kind of 6, 7, 8 territory. I don't know, man. I think it's getting a bit out of hand. Like, it's the whole, like, don't double count it. Like, we know CeeDee Lamb is good at football. So when you see him making these great plays in practice, like, it should not be raising him up your rankings. Like, we know he's good. He's going to need either super crazy efficiency or Amari Cooper to miss time, I think, to, pay off at the wide receiver 10 price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no way that Kev Dog was using the Draft Sharks War Room for that pick. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, exactly. Like, everyone knows CeeDee Lamb is good, and if you don't, then you should stop playing, for fantasy football. But it's about target share. It's about now listen. There is a world that's not too far away where he smashes, right? Where there's injuries to Cooper, injuries to Gallup, but there's also injuries right now to Dak Prescott. So. I mean, I do want CeeDee Lamb. I just feel like he always goes a little bit earlier than I'm willing to pay. And he, so yeah, I don't know if he's going to get the target share to have that, because even in the third round, you're trying to take receivers like A.J. Brown, like DK Metcalf, who have a shot at top 3 upside as a wide receiver. And I don't think CeeDee Lamb has that unless there's major injuries to Cooper or Gallup.
Yeah, there are a couple of paths I need to walk down for this one. CeeDee Lamb, for me, is not somebody I'm paying the price for that you have to get him, but he's also not somebody that I'm saying you're stupid for paying the price on him, because
sure,
I do think he could just go off this year. No matter what exactly it needs to look like, it only helps that Amari Cooper is dealing with an ankle injury, has not come back to practice yet. So, I mean, at the very least, there's more risk to Amari Cooper than there would normally be. And I just read today where he actually had 2 separate injuries in the ankle. It was initially bone spurs, and then when he had the surgery to clean those up, he got more flexibility in the ankle, he said, and that allowed him to feel the second injury. So I guess that might explain why it took longer to recover from the surgery and taking longer to get back into football shape, I guess. So I think the Amari Cooper situation makes me wary of, I don't know, calling CeeDee Lamb an egregious pick at ADP. If we had a healthy Amari Cooper, I think it would be tough to see it, but it's easier to see that path. Now, the other thing here is, Jared, I think every year Kevin does this to us, is there are these sneaky players that he likes more than he ever tells us, and then we have to watch something like him draft to learn how he feels about him.
Yeah, he has mentioned to me before that I at least knew that he liked Lamb over Cooper, even before kind of the Cooper missing the start of training camp stuff. So he has hinted at it at least, and I don't want to come across as a Lamb hater. Like to me, the only wide receiver I can't see myself taking Lamb ahead of that, Kevin did, is Allen Robinson. I just think Allen Robinson is as good as CeeDee Lamb, and he's just such a safer bet for volume. Like, Allen Robinson is going to get 140 targets if he stays healthy this season. So as a volume guy, I can't take Lamb over Robinson. But honestly, beyond that, I'm fine with Lamb. So he didn't go much higher here than I'd take him at this point.
I mean, I like Terry McLaurin ahead of him. I mean, listen, give me some, and this is the same situation like Mike Evans. Why is Lamb going ahead of Mike Evans? Like, way ahead of Mike Evans. Not in this draft, although he's going 3 receivers ahead. Like, it's the same situation. It's a receiving core that's loaded, and Evans is going to the Hall of Fame, and he's in his prime. You know what I mean? So I'm going to have another Evans meltdown all over again a year later. Like, and here he is, wide receiver 13 again, all over again. But yeah, no, I mean, listen, nobody hates Lamb. Lamb's an absolute stud. He was a stud in college, coming out. He was a high first-round pick. It's a little bit early. It reminds me like Chris Godwin last year. Like, hey, let's pump the brakes on a second-round Chris Godwin. The target share isn't going to be there. He belongs probably more in the 4th round. But listen, if we get news Cooper's not going to be ready for the season, I'll be the first person to click draft in the late 2nd round. So we'll see.
You're definitely not going to be the first person to do it. There are going to be plenty lining up to do it. They're just waiting for it to get to that point. CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, Allen Robinson went right in succession. I agree, Allen Robinson over both Lamb and McLaurin. For me, I just think he's a safer bet. At least as good talent. Well, I guess I shouldn't say at least as good. He's right on par, at least, with those guys. Chris Carson followed Allen Robinson. Mike Evans at the turn. Then Amari Cooper following him at wide receiver 14. So I wonder if that's a bit of flag planting for Jason Moore. His team now, Christian McCaffrey, Tom Brady, George Kittle, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, no matter what his ankle feels like. We'll see where that goes. Chris Godwin followed that pick. I think the knock on Mike Evans is that he did very well in the touchdown department, and I'm talking luck-wise. I've heard some acknowledge how lucky Adam Thielen was in touchdowns last year. Mike Evans was similarly lucky in catching touchdowns last year. And I know Tom Brady helps, but even the best aren't going to be extremely lucky in scoring touchdowns every year. And Mike Evans was somewhere around 30th in target share among wideouts in the league last season.
Yeah, Thielen and Evans are similar to me that, they obviously overachieved in the touchdown department last year. But their usage, inside the red zone and in the end zone was up near the top of the league. So, and Evans especially, because we've seen multiple double-digit touchdown seasons out of him. So he probably won't score 13 times again this season, but I'd set the over/under at like 9.5. And same goes for Thielen, although maybe slightly lesser for him because he's not as proven a touchdown dominator, and I think Justin Jefferson is going to steal some of those red zone looks from him this season. Amari
Cooper, Chris Godwin, Joe Burrow followed that pick off the board. Joe Burrow slipping in ADP a little bit, and he doesn't sound happy about the way things are going with the Bengals offense lately. But I guess putting him on a team that already has Patrick Mahomes as its top quarterback in Superflex is probably a good way to address him. What do you think, Adam?
Well, hold on. I'm not just going to let you slander Mike Evans real quick before I get a chance to. There's no such thing as lucky when you're 6'5". And you're in the prime of your career with Tom Brady at quarterback. He also played. Did he have a high ankle sprain for like 6 weeks last year? That's all I'm saying. Joe Burrow. Yeah, there's been some camp reports that I think yesterday he was terrible. That the offense is sluggish. Maybe there is something to that article, Matt, about those guys coming off ACLs. Those quarterbacks just having a down year the next year. I'm not as high as I was on him earlier in the year. QB 13 isn't terrible. There's so many weapons there, but yeah, he's a guy I'm kind of holding off on for now. Let's wait and see. Maybe he just had a bad couple days, but yeah, I'm a little bit nervous.
It's at least nice to not get the typical coach or player speak where a guy's just like, oh, we're working through some things.
Sure.
It all feels good. I mean, it's good to hear something honest. Not if you're a Bengals fan, certainly not if you're a Bengals player, I'm sure, but at least we're getting honesty and we know what's going on in Cincinnati. Maybe we can pump our brakes if we were excited about the Bengals offense a little bit. Miles Sanders followed Joe Burrow off the board, then David Montgomery. They were running backs 18 and 19. I think that's right in the range where both of those guys belong. I think they both have upside from where they're going in drafts, but nice not to see them slide too far, which they are doing in a lot of best ball drafts at this point. Adam, do you have a favorite between Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, or is there either guy that you're not really touching at cost right now?
Yeah. If I had to choose, I would choose Miles Sanders. Usually those guys are going in like the 4th round of FFPC drafts. And at that point, I'm usually taking a receiver. But if I had to choose, I would choose Miles Sanders. I just think that he's got it's hard to say he's got a higher upside because Montgomery smashed at the end of the year. But I think if they can work him into the screen game, I know they've been talking about getting a better screen game there. And I know maybe Matt, you tweeted about Boston Scott yesterday, which you're right. It does help Boston Scott. It does help kind of the pass catchers there. But I feel like Miles Sanders is fine in the passing game too. So Hurts needs to kind of get that completion rate up, complete some of those shorter passes. And I feel like if they can work Miles Sanders into that, man, he's so explosive. That would work a lot better for him than just pounding him in between the tackles.
And Jared, Mike Pareca's team certainly looking for receptions from those running backs, it looks like. He started with Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf to get that Seattle stack that we mentioned, Terry McLaurin in round 4 after that, then Miles Sanders, Travis Etienne, and now he's got Dallas Goedert in the 7th round. What do you think about Mike's build so far?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, to me, to be able to get Miles Sanders and Travis Etienne as your top 3 running backs after not taking one in the first 4 rounds. I mean, I know it's the quote-unquote running back dead zone and no one wants to touch those guys, but, I mean, Sanders along with Montgomery, I think they're kind of priced near their floor barring injury because, I'd be surprised if both those guys don't easily lead their backfield in carries, and that alone should, make them mid to lower end RB2s. And then they both have the potential to, see pretty solid target shares. We've seen Sanders do it in his first 2 seasons. And Montgomery, we saw him do it last year with Tree Cohen sideline, and, there hasn't been much positive news on Cohen. So Montgomery's kind of been inching up my rankings, as it looks more and more like Cohen will at least be limited to start the season if he's out there at all.
I'm going to have to look back at the dead zone running backs from last year at least, maybe beyond that. But it feels like there are some different player types in the dead zone this year in that round 3 to round 5 range. So that's why I want to check to see if I'm just misremembering. But, I mean, in Miles Sanders and David Montgomery, a couple of clear lead ball carriers for their team. And when you are in that role, you're getting lots of volume. I don't think any of us is expecting either of those offenses to be terrific, but you don't need your offense to be terrific if you are getting that huge share of the backfield touch volume.
The difference to me this year with, the dead zone stuff, and I should actually look this up to make sure it's true, but I'm going to say it anyways, is, it feels like last year running backs going in rounds 3 through 5, it was like running back, 20 through 28, whereas this year the running backs in rounds 3 through 5, it's like running back 15 through running back 22. So, you're just getting a higher quality because all the dead zone talk is pushing running backs down the board. So, that's why I think guys like Sanders, Montgomery are actually fine picks in round 4.
After David Montgomery, we had Robert Woods go to Dan Williamson's team. Then Trey Lance is QB 14 off the board. That hype train is certainly chugging along right now. It was interesting for me to hear John Lynch, though, say on Adam Schefter's podcast that Jimmy Garoppolo is playing as well as he has since he got to San Francisco. So I don't know if they're trying to just publicly, let Trey Lance know that it's not his job just yet, or whether that's true about Jimmy Garoppolo. That's going to be a situation to watch. I think there's been more talk about worrying that Justin Fields isn't going to start, and less with all of the excitement over Trey Lance that he's not going to start, because it could be the same thing there. And I think if we're betting between San Francisco and Chicago, I would bet on the 49ers winning more games, thus making it more difficult to make that QB switch in season.
Yeah, I think they might be propping him up to trade him too. I mean, he's – but you know what? Garoppolo's won in the league, and it's very similar to – like we've talked about before, that San Francisco situation. I'm sorry, that Kansas City Chiefs situation a couple of years ago. It's like this San Francisco team was so hurt last year. The year before, they were in the Super Bowl. Like, this team is loaded with talent. If Garoppolo starts and doesn't lose, how do you take him out? But San Francisco's done that before. They did it with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think Lance is fine where he's going. And he's got that real nice upside, just like Justin Fields does. But yeah, we'll see what direction the Niners want to take it.
Let's talk about the roster that Trey Lance landed on in this particular draft. It's Anthony Amico at the 7th spot to begin with. Started with Lamar Jackson, Calvin Ridley, Jonathan Taylor in round 3, Mark Andrews to get that Ravens stack as the tight end 6 off the board in round 4. Then he followed Trey Lance with Brandon Ayuk as the wide receiver 22, Laviska Shenault in the 7th round. So, Jared, the 2 stacks so far, I think if Trey Lance starts early, I mean, this could be a dangerous roster.
Yeah, it's a fun team with the stacks. I don't think anyone on this team is older than like 27, and that's Calvin Ridley, like 27-year-old, 30-year wide receiver. To me, it's too early on Ayuk, but the fact that he has Trey Lance, if Lance makes that a top 5 offense, maybe Ayuk pays off there. But definitely a team where Anthony has a lot of guys who still have their best football ahead of them, and could definitely beat ADP here because of that.
I think we talked about him last night. Ayuk was one of those guys that I started out thinking he's going too early and I don't want any of him. And then I've heard lots of smart fantasy folks recently talking up Ayuk as an upside pick where he's going. It just makes me, I don't know, worry a little bit on him and maybe rethink my stance and at least get some shares in case we get something good from him. But that whole offense is going to be interesting to watch, from the quarterback to who's starting in the backfield to how the targets get distributed. I mean, we're all guessing on how it's going to go because there's so much change versus what they've had through the first 3-4 years of Kyle Shanahan being there.
Mm-hmm. What have you heard on Ayuk specifically that's kind of made you change your mind? Because
I think the most specific thing I heard the other night, I was listening to Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon talk with actually Matt Harmon. And Matt Harmon was pointing out that Brandon Ayuk was a winner on all of the route types against man coverage as a rookie last year, and that he's different in style than Deebo Samuel. So you can definitely look at the two guys, say that one was a late first rounder, one was an early second rounder. They should be pretty close in terms of what they get target-wise. But Brandon Ayuk is more of the downfield receiver, more of a traditional type of receiver, whereas Deebo Samuel is a shorter-range guy, as was shown by the league's lowest ADOT last year. I think that's coming up, but how much and how exactly does it work along with Ayuk? The bigger thing for me is how many targets are there. I have no idea what they're going to go with target split-wise. I think they'll be one of the more run-heavy teams in the league, so I don't know how many targets that is, but it's fairly concentrated. Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. So I don't know. The unknown that scares me is really not having any idea how many targets to give to Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a volume thing first and foremost. But then it's also like I'm super excited about Trey Lance this year, but I'm excited about him in fantasy because of the rushing. Like I still have questions about him as a passer. I mean, the guy made 13 starts at the FCS level. Now he's going to be in there in the NFL. So I have concerns at the efficiency, which really has been strong in San Francisco's passing game, whether it's been Garoppolo or Nick Mullins or CJ Beathard. They've been near the top of the league under Kyle Shanahan in yards per attempt. So I'm just worried that even might take a step back with Lance under center. Yeah,
and with Ayuk, it's not that I'm totally changing it and chasing him now. I just want to make sure that I'm not totally out on him and I have a couple of shares here and there. I do think that at 22, you could kind of quibble over who went behind him. That makes more sense. I would probably take Julio Jones over him, but I don't think there was anybody else that went over the next few picks at wide receiver that I'd say I'd definitely take that guy ahead of Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, that's it. No, I'm with you, Matt. I do want to get a couple more shares, but I listened to a podcast today. Dwayne McFarland was talking about how when him and Deebo and Kittle were all healthy, he was third in targets last year. So it was all pretty close. But it does. His ADOT is deeper, obviously, and like you said, he runs different types of routes than Deebo and Kittle do. So there is some upside there, and their schedule is insanely soft for receivers. So yeah, I think I want a little bit more of him. But man, if you get in some of these main events, you got guys like ship chasing guys. Man, they're taking him in like the 5th round, and I'm just like, you're not getting any value on him. So if you want him in these higher stakes events, you got to pay a premium for him.
Yeah, Ayuk is definitely not a chase guy that I'm going to get him wherever you need to. And I agree with the volume questions. I mean, there's also a thing about recently we've been seeing more second-year wide receiver leaps as opposed to where it used to be third-year wide receiver. It's tough to gauge much from what happened in San Francisco last year. I mean, Deebo entered the season hurt. They all missed time. Kittle missed a lot of time. So it's a small sample that we saw with any of them. And during that small sample, Brandon Ayuk is brand new to the NFL. So that's the thing that I guess is worrisome in both directions, in that I don't really know what's going to happen this year on the good side or the bad side. It might just wind up being a pass offense I didn't want any pieces of.
Yeah, I mean, my thing is, wide receiver 22. I just think he's priced much, much closer to the ceiling than the floor. But
Sure.
yeah, the ceiling's definitely there for him to pay off.
Trevor Lawrence followed Trey Lance off the board, QB 15. I would take Trevor Lawrence first. I think that the ceiling is pretty similar on both of those guys, and Trevor Lawrence is a better bet to start the season on the field. I know Trey Lance is the most dynamic runner in the class, but Trevor Lawrence looked like Josh Allen around the goal line last year. He's a string bean, long-haired version of Josh Allen, but in terms of looking for the end zone and calling his own number on a bunch of plays, he did a lot of running for short touchdowns for Clemson last year.
Yeah, I think Lawrence safer. The fact that we know he's going to be out there for week 1, I just think he's safer as a more pro-ready prospect. I do think Lance beats him pretty easily in upside, though. I'm curious to see how much Jacksonville uses Lawrence's legs. Like, are they going to give him any design stuff? I know for a fact that San Francisco is going to use Lance on design runs, so that's kind of where the difference in ceiling comes in for me with those two guys.
DJ Moore went after Trevor Lawrence. That was round 5. We got Tyler Lockett after that at wide receiver 18. Kirk Cousins, we talked about to Scott Fish's team there. Scott Fish said he timed out on the round 2 pick and got Derrick Henry by accident, but that he was okay with Derrick Henry being that pick. Said he was planning to take Russell Wilson with that pick, so he would not have made it to Mike in that spot, Jared, and I think we would have been less surprised to see Russell Wilson go early in round 2. Scott said, though, he was fine pivoting strategy from there, so we'll see where the team goes from that pick forward. Darrell Henderson went RB20 at the 5-6 turn. Deontay Johnson, then Darrell Henderson to John Paulson's team. So John started with Aaron Rodgers, Justin Herbert, then Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Deontay Johnson, Darrell Henderson, Logan Thomas at tight end 8. That's right where he went last night, I believe. Still earlier than I would be comfy taking him. Tyler Boyd was the last pick for John in round 8. Adam, anything stand out to you, good or bad, from that team so far?
No, I think there's something to be said about, Superflex can be a little daunting, especially if you don't play in it often, and I don't get to play it in as much as I want to. And there's something to be said for guys that just like, you know what, I'm just going to take quarterbacks my first and second picks and then just forget about it. Like, then I can just go and work, especially again on the end. You usually see this a lot happen on the end of drafts on the turn, because guys, you don't know if you wait. 24 picks go by and 12 quarterbacks could go. Just go get two quarterbacks and just never have to worry about it for the rest of the draft. Just take kind of the best player available at the other positions. We talked about last night. I don't love Logan Thomas, but Swift. Yeah, I think Swift is right in that range. Right after who did he go after? Yeah, Edwards-Helaire, Harris, Chubb. Yeah, he goes right in there with Dobbins. So. Yeah, so I think that's fine for him, and so nothing really stands out about this team, but yeah, it looks like he wanted to get his 2 quarterbacks out of the way and just move on.
I'm the one that I'm surprised to see Logan Thomas go ahead of is Noah Fant, who went at tight end 9, well into round 8. Beyond that pick with Logan Thomas at the end of round 7, Jared, are you taking 10 picks between Logan Thomas and Noah Fant? How many times are you taking Logan Thomas?
Twice only. But I get the argument is that, the volume that Thomas saw last year, and if I think he's going to get even 90% of that, then, he probably is the pick over Noah Fant. I don't think, Fant's going to get to 110, 120 targets, barring a Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy injury. So that's the argument there. I think Fant is such a better player. He's still on the ascent. Logan Thomas, maybe he still is too. He's older, but he hasn't played the position very long. I just think, people are so excited about Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel's there. J.D. McKissick isn't going to disappear as a option in that passing game. So I just think Thomas's volume is going to drop off quite a bit this season.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen as well. It would be Noah Fant for me, probably 9 times out of 10. I mean, it certainly could get the volume. And I think Curtis Samuel's, a hamstring injury or a groin that's keeping him out? That certainly helps Logan Thomas a bit. But I think that we got the wrong picture of his role from how he finished last season volume-wise. We mentioned it last night. So obviously John knows what he's doing. So we'll see what Logan Thomas does this season, but that would be my lean as Noah Fant over Logan Thomas. Going back around that turn, Scott Fish took Myles Gaskin just before Logan Thomas took Kenny Galladay in round 8. He's the 33rd wide receiver off the board. Adam, I think that's a more fair spot for him. He's now got the mild hamstring issue that he's nursing, but I mean, I think anywhere in the 30s is okay for Kenny Galladay at this point.
Yeah, right, exactly. And everyone's panicking on that Giants offense, and what do we know about that offense? They're going to throw fade routes from the 2-yard line. And what does Kenny Galladay run? He runs fade routes from the 2-yard line. So, they're not a highly successful route, but he could score 7, 8, 9 times on that. I like Kenny Galladay in best ball, which is what this is, over Tyler Boyd, who went in front of him. I mean, Boyd is a steadier player. He's more consistent, I think. But if you're looking for spike weeks, I think Galladay's the guy. I know he's hurt, but I think he's going to have more spike weeks than a guy like Tyler Boyd or even Juju would have.
Mm. Kareem Hunt followed Kenny Galladay off the board. Then it was Cortland Sutton at wide receiver 34. We saw Jerry Jeudy slide to wide receiver 40 last night. He went wide receiver 27 in this draft, which is much closer to his current ADP, and I think certainly a much fairer position. We saw Cortland Sutton going, I believe, well ahead, at least a decent amount ahead of Jerry Jeudy back at the beginning of draft season, but that has shifted ADP-wise, and I think this is probably where it belongs between the two of them, don't you, Jared?
I do, yeah. And, those two guys, Galladay and Sutton, seem like fallers right now. Adam, talked about the stuff with the Giants offense and the hamstring, obviously. It's early August. He's on a new team, new offense, new quarterback. So I'm not panicking with Galladay. I'd actually be a buyer at wide receiver 33, which I didn't think I'd be a Galladay buyer 3 months ago. And then same deal with Sutton. He seems like he's falling. Judy's lighting it up in Broncos camp. Sutton, there's some reports that he's still not totally trusting that knee after the torn ACL. But wide receiver 34. I could see Sutton getting off to a slow start. But I still think at least by the second half of the season, I think you'll be happy if you are able to get him at wide receiver 34.
He's been a low exposure guy for me. I'm not too worried about missing out on anything special from Sutton this year, but we'll see. There's certainly that upside to him. Galladay is a guy that I want only in best ball season. I don't think I want him on a team where I have to decide whether to start him during the year. Adam, let's look at Jerry Hooten's team, who started with Dak Prescott in round 1, then Stephon Diggs, so obviously you're going to like his roster. Nick Chubb, round 3, J.K. Dobbins, round 4, DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp, Ben Roethlisberger is the 22nd quarterback off the board in round 7. Cortland Sutton was his pick in round 8. DJ Chark in round 9. Wide receiver 41 is kind of a low-risk level for DJ Chark. And then in the most recent round, he just took Jonnu Smith as his first tight end 13 off the board in round 10. Adam, what do you think about this build so far?
Yeah, I like it. He's got Prescott. It's kind of anchor his quarterbacks there. I like Chubb more, as RB13. The pass catching upside, not too high. I mean, he's obviously a sensational running back. O-line's awesome there. So I think I like him more as an RB13. I've seen him taken higher up in the RB10 range ahead of Joe Mixon and stuff like that. I think this is where he belongs. Dobbins, RB16, it's kind of where he belongs. So yeah, he got those are fine picks. Love Cooper Kupp. I wish, I'm trying to see here, I wish Theo would have grabbed him to stack with Stafford. But that didn't happen. But yeah, so no, I love Cooper Kupp. Roethlisberger, if he can stay healthy, he'll be fine. I like the build. I like the where he got some of these guys. So yeah, no, I think this is fine the way he's building this team.
Yeah, and Theo had the shot at Cooper Kupp in round 6, picked right before Kupp left the board. He took Justin Fields with that pick. So, obviously didn't care that much about getting the stack with those two particulars. And I'm sure saw the upside in Justin Fields and went that way. Well, that's one of the things worth watching in drafts like this is who cares about the stack, what stacks seem like they might be forced, and what kind of fall to players as we see happen at times too.
Yeah, I would guess that Theo, considered Kupp, but he just prioritized getting that second quarterback, in Justin Fields, guy who I think we're all excited about the upside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you guys real quick. I know we haven't talked about Dobbins for a couple months, kind of since the rankings came out. He's a guy that I'm really terrified to not have any shares of because I feel like he's so talented, and if they just decide without letting us know that they're going to start throwing the ball to the running back, his upside is through the roof. Have you guys find yourself taking him at all just to get some shares of him, or is just, normally he goes in like the middle of the third or beginning of the third round? Is that just too steep?
So I like the fact that underdog is half PPR. That's actually where I'm taking some J.K. Dobbins. He gets into the fourth round sometimes on underdog, and even in the back half of round 3, I think Dobbins, makes sense in half PPR. In the full PPR, I think RB16 is too high. I mean, yeah, Adam, you mentioned all those things, all the ifs. If those all go in Dobbins' favor, yeah, he's gonna beat RB16. That's not a bet I'm gonna make. Guys like Lamar Jackson, those running quarterbacks, we know they target running backs at a lower rate. That's been the case with Lamar through his first 2 seasons. Gus Edwards is not going away. I mean, he's good. He beat Dobbins in PFF rushing grade last year. Gus Edwards averaged 5 yards per carry. Dobbins was up at 6, but Gus Edwards is good. Baltimore just gave him that new contract. I don't think he's going away. So I don't see. Dobbins will need a lot to break right in his favor to pay off at RB16.
Yeah. As Dobbins, I mean, I had absolutely no Dobbins in round 2, and I was shocked to see him start draft season in that range. When he got to the end of round 3 and when he gets to that 3-4 turn and underdog, I'm definitely taking a couple of shares just in case some things happen. I think, though, for him to ultimately hit his ceiling, Gus Edwards has to get hurt. And obviously that's possible, but that's not something I want to bet on with a round 3 pick. That's something I would rather take a chance on later in the draft. And I think with Gus Edwards healthy, the ultimate ceiling for J.K. Dobbins still finds him with playing a quarterback who's bad for his ultimate scoring ceiling. I mean, Lamar Jackson is not going to turn into Phillip Rivers, even if they throw him the ball more, and they pretty much have to. What's the upside for receptions? Maybe he gets to 30. I'm not sure that he gets a whole lot beyond that, and he's not going to get, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook carry numbers to offset that. What's the touchdown upside? I mean, Baltimore could score a ton, and then he would get a nice share of that. But Lamar Jackson's always going to take some of those ground scores. So, I can get being excited about J.K. Dobbins, and I don't want to have zero exposure to J.K. Dobbins, but he's not one of those – he's not a smash value for me at any point where he's going in drafts this year.
Yeah, I get it.
So we went to that Jerry Hooten team here. Beyond him was Rich Rebar. We mentioned took Trevor Lawrence a few rounds back, took T. Higgins after that, took Robbie Anderson, Deebo Samuel, Chase Edmonds, the running back 26 off the board here in round 9, Will Fuller, his last pick in round 10. So Rich has Kyler Murray to go with Trevor Lawrence, nice couple of upside quarterbacks there, A.J. Brown in round 4. Chase Edmonds was his second running back. He took Zeke back in round 2. So we've seen a few teams take a running back early and then wait. We'll get to Anthony Amico's roster in a minute. Jared, anything stand out to you about Rich's build so far here?
I mean, the wide receivers are sweet, obviously. I love those first 4 in particular. He's solid at quarterback. I think getting Chase Edmonds at RB26 in the 9th round here, in a full PPR. I'm not sure how carries are going to be divvied in Arizona yet between Edmonds and James Conner, but Edmonds is pretty much locked in as the lead pass catching back, caught 50+ balls last year. So I think Evans is a nice value at RB26. So Rich just needs to build some running back depth, try to hit on some guys later here, and then figure out tight end.
I'm disappointed that we haven't seen any videos yet of James Conner taking Chase Edmonds out to chop logs and then throw him backward over his head. Seems like something Conner should have brought to the desert. Anthony Amico is drafting next to Rich Rebar here. We alluded to his team a minute ago. Lamar Jackson started it off. Calvin Ridley, Jonathan Taylor, Mark Andrews, Trey Lance, Brandon Ayuk, Laviska Shenault, Daniel Jones, his third quarterback. I believe he was the first team to take that third quarterback. Brandon Cooks then at wide receiver 40. Mecole Hardman at wide receiver 45. He is a team that has only taken one running back and might be the only team now still sitting on one running back. It looks like it. I think he's the only team on the board with one blue tile. Adam, what do you think about what Anthony's got going to this point?
Yeah, I was just looking through to see, because last year in the Invitational, a lot of the success was the teams that took that early stud running back, and then didn't take one for a long time. Pete Overzet, the overall champ, did that. Jack Miller did that, and I think he did that again yesterday. No one really did that today, but this Jonathan Taylor in the third would be the most similar thing. But I don't think that was his strategy to do that, because, if It's hard to do that. Even if you think Taylor's a stud, you can't plan on getting him in the third round, right? So I think it just is how it's fallen for him. But I don't mind the strategy, right? He's got a stud quarterback, stud receiver, stud running back, stud tight end, and then he came back and got two more quarterbacks. So I think those quarterback spots, he's going to look really good. Receiver, he's going to look really good because he took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the first 10 rounds, right? So I think he's going to be fine at quarterback, receiver. He's got a stud tight end. Let's see what he can do. That's always the question: is what can these modified zero RB guys do? Can they get the right players at running back to follow them in these mid rounds?
He's still got another 15 picks to sort out this roster. Jared, what do you think so far?
That's exactly what I was just going to say, and something we haven't talked about over these first 2 nights yet is the fact that we go 25 rounds here, and there's no kickers and no defenses. So you have a ton of roster spots to play with. Anthony can take 8 running backs by the end of this thing. I think that's something similar to what Pete Overzet did last year. I remember looking at his board last night, and he pounded running back late. One of the guys he got was Mike Davis, which I think ended up being the reason he won that league last year. So the fact that there are so many rounds, I think, makes going super light at one position more viable here than it does on, say, underdog, where you only have 18 picks.
Yeah, 87 running backs went off the board in last night's night 1 DS Invitational draft. 120 wide receivers off the board. So we've probably got another 20 minutes or so on this stream, but the draft is going to keep going well beyond that. You can follow the draft board itself. The link is in the Draft Sharks Discord. We will show you the full results tomorrow as well. It will be interesting to see how Anthony fills out his roster. Dan Williamson drafted next to him, Travis Kelce, Antonio Gibson, CEH, Jalen Hurts, Robert Woods, Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham. So he's got the Browns stack there in the middle. Baker Mayfield was the 19th quarterback, Beckham the 28th wide receiver. So I think both of those right about where they're going ADP-wise. Then we got, Antonio Brown is the 36th wide receiver off the board. So that's a little bit earlier than we're seeing him go ADP-wise. Not a ton earlier, but a little bit earlier. So I think with Brown, along with the Antonio Gibson pick that we mentioned earlier, some guys that it seems like Dan likes, right, Adam?
Yeah, for sure. I think he's definitely getting his guys. But I also noticed, too, Sam Darnold on the rise. I mean, he rose yesterday. He's rising. He's rising again today. I think who took – Kev Dog. Let's go. I love it. But it's and the cool thing about this format again is that teams can really go get their guys because there's you pick your own strategy, right? There's no one's going to say that you're crazy unless you don't take a quarterback for the first 12 rounds. So it's really cool to see kind of who people plant their flag on and what type of strategy these guys are going to go with.
Now, Adam, Sam Darnold grew up in California. He went to college in California. Then he started his career in New York City. Are we at all worried about him now going to Charlotte? Like, I don't know if you can find avocado toast in Charlotte.
Well, he's not from Firebach, California. I'll tell you that much. Because if he was, then I'd definitely be all in on him. But avocado toast not my cup of tea.
That's probably in Charlotte at this point, to be fair, but I'm not sure that they have as many sprouts as he's probably used to from his days growing up in California. So back to Dan's team, because I noticed that another bit of a flag planting player, a guy that Jared likes, no matter how many times I tell him to stop liking him, was Rondale Moore, his round 11 pick, wide receiver 51. So, it's obviously not a spot that's killing anybody if a guy doesn't pay off, but it's ahead of ADP and ahead of where I'd take him, Jared.
Yeah, I mean, that's a few spots later than I'm drafting him. And he's already showing out in camp here. AJ Green, surprise, is sidelined with some injury as a 32-year-old or whatever he is now. I think Christian Kirk's been missing time as well. So it's kind of all green light here for Moore to carve out a role. I'm excited about the player in that offense. I think he's a perfect fit.
And before that, he had the Zach Wilson, Michael Carter stack, which just might be the rocket ship we need in this tournament. Jets, baby. Jets.
No, I like Michael Carter a lot. He usually goes around RB 28, 29, somewhere in there. He's been having a phenomenal camp. I think he's obviously the pass catching back there, and I think he's a guy that has massive upside on a team that's not supposed to win a lot of games as the pass catching running back. How much is his upside past RB 28? It's probably not top 10. But if he could stay healthy, he's certainly a high-end RB2.
And he went, let's see, RB28 versus Javonte Williams at RB25 in this draft, but nearly 2 rounds of separation between the two guys here. So interesting to note between two college teammates. And I mean, they're different player types, but they're both in situations where fantasy drafters really think that they're going to be the top running backs in their backfield this year. We'll see where both of those go. Not a couple players that I've been targeting, but, guys that I'll take a few shares of here and there. Let's talk about Kevin's team now, which we've glanced over a few times, but we've got the Josh Allen start that just, always makes Adam grin like we won't go any further with that. Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, CeeDee Lamb, David Montgomery, Tua Tagovailoa to the Dolphins fan in the 6th round, Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver 27. So we would see maybe how much further he would go if he got close to last night's price, if he got past Kevin there. Sam Darnold, the QB 24 off the board in round 8. Tyler Higbee, tight end 11 in round 9. Darnell Mooney in round 10. And then Cole Beasley in round 11. As long as Cole Beasley doesn't decide to quit America just because somebody told him he should get a shot, I mean, there's nothing but value from Cole Beasley in that spot, right, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, you get that nice little Allen Beasley stack, right? We're working. Like you said it about Beasley. If he plays, that's a smash. I feel like Kev Dog's like a tight end whisperer. I feel like he's always got a tight end or two every year that he always is able to kind of pick behind ADP that always smashes. Now I know Higbee's not really a sleeper, but it makes me happy to see that Kevin is on the Higbee train. Obviously, you know how I feel about Sam Darnold. Tua, I'm coming around on Tua. I think the weapons there are he has so many weapons, and his O-line is so good that he'd have to be really terrible to not pay off QB 20. So I think that's perfectly fine there, and be able to wait and get a guy like Tua allows you to kind of smash at the running back like he did there, Eckler, Mixon, Montgomery. And hopefully he waits a while before he takes another one because you don't really need to take too many running backs after you have those 3.
Jared, what do you think the ceiling is on Tua this year?
I think he could flirt with top 12 numbers. I'll disagree with Adam that the Dolphins O-line is awesome. I think that's my biggest concern for Tua is I think the O-line is still a question mark. And then you have Devontae Parker's already been banged up in camp, and Will Fuller's sidelined. So you got Waddle coming off the serious injury. So the wide receivers are injury risks, durability risks. I think if they're all healthy, that could be a top 10 wide receiver trio in the NFL. I think Tua, his struggles last year shouldn't have come as a major surprise. One, he's a rookie quarterback. 2, he's coming off the major hip injury. So I think he's capable of taking a big step forward this season. He provided decent rushing production last year, and nothing difference making, but something to just boost the fantasy production a bit, and that could take a step forward this year too. With a hip injury, another year removed. So, I think he could finish as a top 15 or so quarterback this year.
I'm going to be interested to see how he does durability-wise in general in the NFL because he's a bit on the small side, and I don't know. Obviously, a guy like Drew Brees was on the small side, but didn't run a whole lot. So I'm curious to see how much Tua runs and whether he's big enough to hold up through it. But we've also seen lately that running quarterbacks actually don't get hurt as much as pocket quarterbacks. So, it might be something that I just mentioned for absolutely no reason. So we'll move on to Mike Pareca's team in this draft. A long gap between his quarterbacks, but he added his second one recently. Started with Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson, as we mentioned, got the Metcalf stack, Terry McLaurin, Miles Sanders, Travis Etienne, Dallas Goedert, Noah Fant back-to-back at tight end. I like those. Goddard could be the target leader for the Eagles, especially with Devontae Smith battling what might or might not be a significant knee sprain. I believe that's Devontae Smith on his team, though, in round 9, if I'm not mistaken. And then Trey Sermon following that. Carson Wentz, QB 31 in round 11. And he just took Gerald Everett as his 3rd tight end off the board. Adam, anything stand out to you on Mike's team so far?
It's interesting. I'm just looking up, how old is Zach Ertz? Is he dead?
He's like 30 or 31, I think, right?
I was going to say.
Yeah.
30. Yeah, he's 30. I mean, oh my goodness.
I could see the path for Zach Ertz a little bit more before he showed up to training camp in the Billy Idol costume.
He's rejuvenated with that haircut. Are you kidding me?
That's not rejuvenated. That's when you're trying to audition for the part of Puck on one of the first Real World seasons.
He's 30. Like, he's 30 years old. Like, again, do I think he's as good as Goddard at this point in his career? No. But if he stays on the Eagles, that's a huge downgrade for Goddard. So I don't know. I just don't see. And I know Goddard is Hurts' favorite target, and I get all that. But man, if Ertz stays there, he's not going anywhere. Like, I don't know. I just can't get on the Goddard train until Ertz is in a Buffalo Bills uniform. So I don't know.
Well, tell him to step it up and offer a worthwhile draft pick and make it happen. Jared, what do you think about this roster?
Yeah, just with Goddard and Ertz, I'm not sure I'd say Ertz is a huge problem for Goddard because I do think he's on the downside of his career, and his relationship with the Eagles has been rocky. So I'm not, they could scale back his role even if he does stick around, and I do still think there's a decent chance that he's on another roster, if not by week 1, then by the NFL trade deadline at least. I like what Mike has done at wide receiver and running back. Quarterback worries me a bit with Wentz as your second, where he could miss the first 2 months of the season. We'll see, what else Mike adds. And then at tight end, I have no issue with Goddard and Fant in the 7th and 8th. I'm not sure I would have come back and spent a 12th rounder on Gerald Everett after that, though.
Yeah, I mean, that could help ensure against the lack of a quarterback early in the season, though, where you have the 2 flex spots and the tight end premium. So I don't know. Zach Wilson was somebody he could have taken instead of Devontae Smith. That would at least give you somebody that is likely to start throughout the season. Who else could have been options? Noah Fant versus, Jared Goff, Ryan Fitzpatrick were the next quarterbacks off the board after that. So I would have taken Noah Fant there. So, it'll be interesting to ask Mike whether that was the plan, to just wait a while before addressing quarterback behind Russell Wilson, or if that's just how the picks fell out and he didn't get any of the quarterbacks that he was hoping to see get to those specific spots. Round 7, I think, was another one where, Derek Carr went off the board right before he took Goddard. So we'll move to Graham Barfield's team, and he just took 3 straight tight ends. Jared, I'm sure that you feel a little bit differently looking at where he took those tight ends than you did with the third that Mike chose.
Right, because Graham kind of ignored he did ignore the position through the first 10 rounds, and then he just kind of loads up and he's just playing the numbers game with Jonnu Smith, Adam Trautman, Austin Hooper, and just hoping those 3 guys combined can get him by at tight end. So I think I think that makes sense, and I do think around Hooper there might be a couple guys left that I'm missing, but around here is where there's kind of a drop off at tight end. Then you're just kind of throwing darts at guys you hope are going to have a role.
Yeah, and I did assign the wrong Smith to Jerry Hooten's team earlier. I said Jonnu Smith. He took Irv Smith as the tight end 13. That was in round 10. It took almost a round's worth of picks after that to get to Jonnu Smith at tight end 14. Then, as you mentioned, Jonnu Smith, Adam Trautman, Austin Hooper, 3 straight picks for Graham Barfield. He's got to be happy, I think, to take Austin Hooper as the tight end 18 and the third in that particular build. It could very well be done with tight end completely in round 13 with 12 rounds left to go to address all the other positions. So Trautman also joins Michael Thomas in a bit of a Saints stack on that team. Michael Gallup is on that team before that. He took Javonte Williams, took Chase Claypool, Adam Thielen as the wide receiver 23. So we saw Thielen, one of the surprisingly early picks last night, went wide receiver 13 to Ian Allen's team. Wide receiver 23 has been more like where you can expect to see him to go. Joe Burrow, Allen Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, Patrick Mahomes rounds out the roster for Graham here. The next team over just took Kenyon Drake, Damian Harris, the past 2 picks. That's Billy Muzio's team. Took Elijah Moore at wide receiver 49, Jarvis Landry before that, Evan Ingram at tight end 10. Jerry, that's somebody that you and I have talked about a bit, both offline and on the podcast lately. But tight end 10 is earlier than he's been going in ADP, so a slight flag plant for Billy on that pick.
Yeah, I like Higbee pretty easily ahead of Ingram, and then I'd even take Irv Smith ahead of Ingram. But Ingram's ADP is like tight end 14, and that's kind of the price I'm buying. Just based on the talent that I do think is there, and I still think he's going to be a big part of that passing game. Like they have bodies in New York, but I think Kenny Galladay is the only guy who's going to command a significant part of that passing game. So I think Ingram will still be in the mix to finish second or third on that team in targets.
Yeah, I'll take Ingram easily over Irv Smith. I think you can go either way between Ingram and Higbee. The question on Higbee obviously is if there's anything even in the neighborhood of what he did at the end of 2019, or if 2020 is just what we should get used to. Of course, the other question is if Jacob Harris is just going to come in and be Kyle Pitts.
Doubt it, but you never know.
Yeah. I wouldn't bet on it either, but I mean, it seems like every time I blink, there's some highlight with Jacob Harris doing something deep downfield. So Billy Muzio's the rest of his team is Jared Goff as the QB 25, Derek Carr as the QB 21, took those guys in back-to-back rounds, Jamar Chase, Chris Godwin, Chris Carson, Ryan Tannehill, DeAndre Hopkins, Dalvin Cook. Anything stand out to you there, Adam?
Yeah, so I like Elijah Moore is wide receiver 49. I'm surprised there's so much hype on him right now, and probably justified. That I'm surprised he didn't go a little bit higher. So I think it's a really good pick for him there. Wide receiver 49. I mean, he legit could be the number one receiver there. So I really like that. Yeah, tight end 10 for Ingram's a little bit high. Last night he went tight end 13 in the 11th round. But yeah, I just think the Giants are just a mess. And Ingram, I think, is super talented. But he just needs to get out of New York or something, because I don't think we're ever going to see him get back to where he was, like his rookie year. But yeah, 3 quarterbacks by round 8's fine, especially when you're going to wait a little bit on them. I probably, I would have taken Stafford over Tannehill, but other than that, I don't mind his draft so far.
Jason Moore's team that started us off and sits at the 1-2 turn, or no, I'm sorry, at the 2-3 turn, because he started with the pick at number 1. Beyond McCaffrey, Tom Brady, George Kittle, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Julio Jones, Josh Jacobs, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Curtis Samuel at wide receiver 37, David Johnson at running back 30, Jameis Winston at QB 30, just ahead of Carson Wentz in round 11, James Conner running back 37, Emmanuel Sanders at wide receiver 60. Jared, I'd be curious to know if Kevin would have taken Emmanuel Sanders, because later in round 13 he took Gabriel Davis to keep building on those mid to later round Bills passing game options. Maybe Kevin is listening and can tell us in the chat if he would have taken Emmanuel Sanders over Gabe Davis. But Jared, I think that's your lean right now, is Sanders ahead of Davis, right?
Yeah, my lean's starting to become Sanders ahead of Cole Beasley even. I think Sanders might finish second on that team in fantasy points, so I like him at wide receiver 60. And then, Jason Moore taking like 2 of the running backs that like no one wants to take, and kind of biting the bullet on David Johnson and James Conner, kind of on everyone's hate list. But I think both of those guys could pay off of those price tags. And David Johnson, I just think he's going to be the lead pass catching back in Houston's backfield. Phillip Lindsay, I could see out carrying him, but I think Johnson's going to be the pass catcher on a bad football team with a pretty weak wide receiver core. So I think Johnson could rack up a sneaky amount of target volume this season. And then, as I mentioned, when we talked about Chase Edmonds, I think there's a chance that, James Conner kind of just plays the Kenyon Drake role this season and, carries 200 plus times if his body holds up. So at RB 37, I think that's the right spot for him.
Yeah, certainly a fine spot to take a shot on him. And Jason Moore is an Arizona guy, so I'm sure he's not sad to have James Conner on his roster to see what happens. Kevin did say in the chat that it would be Emmanuel Sanders over Gabe Davis for him, so certainly a fallback pick. What do you say we carry this through round 14, and then we'll call it a night for the stream, guys? Does that work for you?
Sure.
We're almost halfway through round 14 as we speak. Scott Fish said round 12, 13 was a killer for him. Wait for him another 7 rounds when people are still sniping you, even though you're picking, running back 68. It's a frustrating draft. It's a frustrating room, but that's part of the fun of the Draft Sharks Invitational. We still got 4 more of these drafts. We've got one Thursday night starting at 9 o'clock, so Adam's going to have to take a nap before that one.
Sure am.
We've got 3 of them next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, all Eastern times. So, if you're out on the West Coast, you can do the Draft Shark stream and then still go out later that night. Getting back to the picks, though, we had Emmanuel Sanders, Kenyon Drake, Austin Hooper, Tony Pollard at running back 39. It's a little early for me, but, people like him. Then after that was the Gabe Davis pick to Kevin's team. We had Rob Gronkowski go off after that, Hunter Henry at tight end 20. Jared, is Hunter Henry underrated at this point? It's tough to get excited about any pass catcher really in New England, but at tight end 20, given what they paid him and what he's done before.
Yeah, I think he's underrated. I like both those Patriots tight ends. I know Adam has a few teams where he's stacked both of them. I think that makes sense. I think Henry and Jonnu Smith could finish 1-2 on that team in targets this season. Both talented guys, both guys who can, do damage in the passing game. They've shown it. They need Mac Jones under center, I think, though. I think that Patriots offense is going to look similar to what it did last year if Cam Newton's under center. New England ranks second last in both pass rate and passing attempts. So that just makes it tough to get, viable fantasy options in that passing game. But if Mac Jones gets under center, and I do think he will this year, I'm not sure exactly how early, and that's going to impact Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry's fantasy production. But I think if he's under center, that at least one of those guys, is going to pay off. Maybe not both, because that can be tough. But at least one of them, both going outside the top 12 tight ends in ADP, I think they're worth some shots.
Yeah, I think we should expect Cam Newton to pass better this year than he did last year, given the injury situation. I mean, he came into the team getting over some stuff, had COVID during the season, had a limited time to get used to the new surroundings. So I think he should be better. I also agree that a switch to Mac Jones is probably the ultimate upside move for any of the pass catching options in New England this season. Adam, if you had the choice, and we did have that possibility for Graham's team where he already had Jonnu Smith and then he chose Austin Hooper with Hunter Henry still on the board, do you think that you would have taken Hunter Henry instead of Hooper to stack those two Patriots tight ends together, or just get one of them and then go for the number one guy in Cleveland and not spend too much capital on the Patriots?
Yeah, no, I would go with Henry. As soon as free agency opened, they paid both these guys largely and quickly. I think they want to go. They want to run the ball. They want to use tight ends, similar to when they did with Aaron Hernandez and Gronk. You know what I mean? But like Jared said, they really need Mac Jones. I mean, Ken Newton threw 8 touchdowns in 15 games last year. That's freaking impossible in 2020. 8 touchdowns in 15 games. Like it doesn't get worse than that. So you need Mac Jones, especially because when they get down to the goal line, Cam Newton's going to be running the ball, and that's a lot of times where tight ends get those free touchdowns from play action. The tight end's wide open in the end zone. If we can get Mac Jones in there and get, I think both those tight ends can kill their ADP for sure. And before we move on, because I know we're at the end there, Zach Moss at RB44. Like, I'm a totally not a Bills running back guy, but that's I can't tell who made that pick, but in the 14th round at RB44 for Dan Williamson, that's a great pick.
I was gonna say I like all those running backs that went in the early 14th round there. I actually prefer Jamal Williams and Leonard Fournette to Zach Moss, and I think Latavius Murray is a nice pick too. A guy who could have some standalone value, but also we know he is an elite handcuff. He's probably going to be a top 12 guy if Kamara misses time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that the running backs that went in that range as well. And looking, I think it's interesting to note among the Dolphins receivers that I just saw Devontae Parker go late in round 13 as wide receiver 62. Jalen Waddle went wide receiver 42. 4 rounds earlier, we saw Will Fuller go in round 10 following Waddle. So a lot of separation among those guys. Waddle to Fuller, just one wide receiver between them, but then 18 more between Fuller and Parker. Jared, is that how you would sort them out, or do you think that's too big a gap?
It's too big a gap. That's I rank them Fuller, Waddle, Parker, but they're all super close. And I think they should all be going within a round or two of each other. I think Waddle and Fuller went in fine spots. Devontae Parker at wide receiver 62. I'm not really on him this season, but I would definitely take him at wide receiver 62. There's a chance that he leads the Dolphins in targets this season.
And before we head out, Scott said that he added to his comment about 12-13 being a killer. He passed on a tight end, he said, figuring he'd get somebody coming back to him, but then watched 8 tight ends leave the board before it got back to his turn. He just took his 3rd tight end, Zach Ertz, in round 14. So he and Adam are now cheering for Billy Idol as the number 2 tight end of the Eagles. Jimmy Kempski did say this week that he still thinks Zach Ertz will get traded. You have to wonder exactly what that's based on, though, other than the two sides not seeming to like each other that much anymore. But, we'll see. There's still bound to be some injuries in training camp. So that's going to do it for the stream of this draft tonight. You can follow along in the Draft Sharks Discord to see all of the results through round 25. I don't care if the drafters are tired. They're going to have to keep going until the end if they want to win this prize. It will be a challenge right up to the end. We're going to head out, though, now. As I said, the full draft board will be on Draft Sharks Twitter at completion. Recap of the drafts on podcast. We'll talk to some of the guys that had some of the most interesting builds, ask them our questions. Of course, if you have any drafts coming up with unique formats or even just common setups for fantasy, make sure that you are equipped with the brand new Draft Sharks War Room. We will take your specific league settings, customize our projections to your format. Then we will sync it with your league hosting site to maximize your draft experience, help you beat your league. Become a DS Insider today, and even if you're not ready to make that leap and become an insider yet, you can join us for free in the Draft Sharks Discord. A bunch of guys already have tonight. There are plenty of people in there who have already been talking about their drafts, asking questions, and bouncing things off of people. So check the post on YouTube for this, for the link for our Discord, and join us there, ask us your questions, and just talk to us about fantasy. For Jared Smola, Adam Krautwurst, and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.